Family Youth System Partner Roundtables. Again, I'm Karen Kelly. I'm the project director for the Washington State Community Connectors. And our objectives for today are going to be understanding the purpose of the FSPRT, understanding the benefits to families and system partners becoming members of their regional or local FSPRT, understanding the role you have in the work of the FSPRT, and ensuring you know what region you are in and who your contact person would be so you can connect to your regional or local FSPRT. And I want to clarify one thing. When I say families, I'm not talking about a nuclear family per se, where you have a parent and or parents and children. When I say families, I just mean families, humans. My son and his turtle are a family. Like, that's his family, him and his turtle, and that's his family. And he's content with that, and that's who he is. So when I say families, I'm referencing just human people. Your family might be you and your two besties, might be you and your dog or your cat or your turtle. So that's what I mean when I say families, just to clarify that. And it might mean you and your partner and your children. So it's all good. So what is a FSPRT? So this is from the Washington State Healthcare Authority website. And I know that they were very intentional about wanting to use family-friendly language. And so this is what they came up with for us, and I appreciate it. It says Washington State Family Youth System Partner Roundtables provide a forum for families, youth, systems, and communities to strengthen sustainable resources by providing community-based approaches to address the individual behavioral health needs of children, youth, and families. So that is what the FSPRT is. I'm sorry if you can hear my pig. I'm trying to get my husband to wake up so he can come and get him. So what do FSPRTs do? I'm going to put this up for a second. I'm not going to attempt to read it because it's pretty serious language. But basically, short term, we'll break it down later. It is a part of the children's behavioral health structure. And it was adopted over a settlement, a lawsuit that came in through the state. And this was part of the settlement agreement to make things a little bit better. And it includes the implementation of wraparound with intensive services, which is called WISE. So the first thing I wanted to go over is the Children's Behavioral Health Governance Structure. And it has actually recently changed. So this is the updated version of what that structure looks like. So if it is a little different than what you've seen prior, that's why, because it's recently changed. So you'll notice on the screen at the bottom level here are the local regional FSPRTs. And those are the groups that we'll be talking about today. And then each of the regional FSPRTs, there are 10 regions in our state, each of them send their representatives to the state FSPRT meetings that occur quarterly. And so the next level of that is the state FSPRT. And then we have a FSPRT subgroup. And we'll get into that a little bit further as well, but that's our next layer and level to the governance structure. And then after that is the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group. That's the next tier. The very highest tier is then the recommendations go to the state legislature, which we all know are the folks that hold the purse strings. So the local and regional FSPRTs directly impact what recommendations will go to the state legislator in the way of budgeting and funds to go out to children's behavioral health. So that is kind of the overview. We're going to get to the nitty-gritty here in a moment. Are we all able to hear me okay over Albert? Okay, I see a couple thumbs up, so I'm gonna call it good. Okay, so our next slide is what does the FSPRT offer me? And it offers you a place to be heard, a place to learn, and a place to find common ground. It also offers you a place to help facilitate change within our community and a place to remember I am not alone in this journey. So that's where we're going to stop. And I want to kind of, now that you've had the overview, I want to kind of go back and kind of break down some of what the FSBRT's purpose and goals are. So the first one is what do the FSBRTs do? This is the first one I really want to break down for us. And that is really understanding what this verbiage here that the state has given us, what that means. So the first question I had is, what the heck is a children's behavioral health governance structure? And so that's where I researched what it was, and I was able to discover what that was. Because if you don't know what that is, then you really don't know how a FSBRT fits into that. And I really believe that it's important for all of us, whether we represent a family voice, a youth voice, or a system partner voice at the table, that we understand the value of the FSBRTs and of their unique individual voice opportunities. If we understand the work of the FSBRT, we can better participate and help ensure that our FSBRT is functioning as it was intended. FSBRTs have a very unique space at the state table. It's very uncommon for a family and a youth voice to literally have a seat at the state table. And this is what the FSBRTs allow for us. So that is really exciting that we get to have that space, because again, that state table includes the table that holds those purse strings. And as much as financing is difficult and challenging, without that financing, we can't do the work that we're tasked to do. Sorry, my husband is coming. Now, the FSBRTs function on a tri-lead model. And I'd love for Javon to help me with the hand raising. And does anybody know what the tri-lead model is? Except Ashley. We'll see if somebody else doesn't. And then if nobody else does, then we're going to have Ashley share. What is a FSBRT tri-lead model? Feel like Bueller? Anyone? Anyone? I don't see any thumbs up. I don't hear Javon. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Ashley, are you comfortable sharing what the FSBRT tri-lead model is?
I am comfortable sharing. I hope that I can answer it to your standards.
Oh, I'm sure you can.
FSBRT has what we call the tri-lead model, which means that there's 3 people, 4 if you want to include our convener, but I don't think Karen is there yet. There is a youth co-lead, a family co-lead, and a system partner co-lead, which basically means all 3 parties, the youth, the family, and the system partner, are present at the table. And each of those subcategories have representation and voice at our meetings. How did I do?
Very good. You did awesome. Can you all still hear me? I didn't mute myself, did I? Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay, good. I was like, I hope I didn't mute myself. So yes, that is awesome. That is exactly it. So I don't know personally, I'm sure there are organizations and things that I'm not aware of, but personally, I don't know of any other state funded and state approved organization that has that model in such a large capacity. Now the WISE services obviously do, but as far as at a table where the youth, the family, and the system partner are equal. It's not a hierarchy of power, it is equal tri-led model. And that in itself is really an amazing opportunity for people within this state to be heard. And so that's the gist of what a FSBRT is. It is a space to provide us an opportunity to be heard. And I do not even have the slide that I thought I had. So does everyone know what a forum is? Because that was a word that confused me when I first looked at this, when I tried to break it down to a little more family-friendly language for myself. Do y'all know what a forum is? Does anyone want to hop out with what they think a forum is? All right, well, I haven't heard anything, so I'm going to tell you what a forum is. I had it all written out very nicely from the definition of the dictionary, and wouldn't you know, that slide didn't print out. But a forum basically is a group that is open to the public for everyone to give input. So that right there tells you, okay, this is an open table. It is not an invite-only table. It is not a table simply for a certain demographic or a certain type of person. It is an open forum, which means that anybody and everybody can come and sit at that table and have a place at the table, not just a token seat, but share their voice. And so that is one of the only times that we actually have an opportunity for all of us, the families, the youth, the systems, and community partners to come together. The next part is what the goal is to strengthen sustainable resources by providing community-based approaches to address the individual behavioral health needs of children and youth and families. And again, Washington State Healthcare Authority has worked really hard to come up with family-friendly language out of a government organization, and I really appreciate that work. And as someone who has a high school diploma and lived experience that brought me into this work, that confused me. So I broke it down further and I said, okay, what is sustainable resources? I totally understand what that is for like the environment, you know, like recycling and, you know, being careful of the water usage, because these are all sustainable resources. But when they're talking about the work that we do and the needs that we have, that confused me. So for me, what I've realized is that simply means resources that are ongoing, that are continuing over the years and even decades to provide community-based services. So that idea is, if you are struggling with behavioral health, if you are struggling with an SUD, or you're struggling with mental health co-occurring disorders, you have the ability to be served in your community. And this is, again, the children's behavioral health governance structure. And so some of you may not have children, you may not be working with children, so you may be wondering, why would I have a space at that table? Why would I want to be at that table? And I just want to encourage you to think outside the box, because the reality is that the children that we're trying to serve today and tomorrow are going to be the young adults of next week. And so the more services that we can provide at a younger age will help them to have strategies and skills and tools to manage the behaviors and the challenges that they are experiencing, and hopefully get a better start and have a stronger base to work from when they do hit that adult world. Because depending on who they are, they literally might hit that adult world at 18. And I know for my family, my children, my 4 children are all adults. And of the 4, 2 are really at a place where they can function at an adult level. The other 2 are still work in progress. Mandy, when I say children, the age range is actually from, for FISPERTs, from birth to, depending on the region, and again, we're trying to settle at, most regions do 25 because the foster system has extended services up to age 25. So some of them do stop at the 18 to 21. But most of them are up to the young adult age. And so I want to just put a question out to you folks that perhaps don't have children or don't work directly with families with children, but work in the adult peer world. What do you think would be a positive of having someone of your strength and experience sit at a FISPERT table and help give input around what can happen for our children? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Oh, and we have a chat, a little awkward silence. Trying to learn to sit in silence sometimes so we can process. So someone says empowering youth because they have a voice. Yes, empowering youth, that's very true because they do have a voice. Someone else says using lived experience to advocate for changes. Yeah, to be able to say, hey, this is what I went through and it wasn't helpful to me and it needs to change. Or to say, hey, this is what I went through and this is what helped me and I want to make sure that it's continued for the children that come under me. Because the reality is, I think if we're truly honest to ourselves, we would all love to work ourselves out of a job. I know I would. And I don't see us working ourselves out of a job. I see us working ourselves really having to be intentional about not burning out because the need is so high. Proof of resilience. Yes, that is huge because one of the challenges of having the youth at the FISPERT table is because of the business that has to be done, it's really hard to find that balance of making it youth friendly and getting the work done. So I think to have adults that have been through the system, they've struggled through the behavioral health services and they're walking their personal walk and journey and they're maybe even working in this community to show, look, I was where you are and look where I am today and I'm still a work in progress and I'm making change and you can too. These are great, feeling like you are a part of the solution. Yeah, so there's really so many good reasons that even though it's established for the children's behavioral health governance, it's really important to have the peer world united. And so that part of that is bringing these adult peers into some of our events and our resources, as well as learning from you guys. This is my second year at a Peer Pathways conference, and every time I come, I learn like so much. And so I'm so excited to see the direction of us all collaborating together. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts on the slides we've gone through so far? Okay, well, not seeing any chat, not hearing any questions. How's everybody doing up there? Thumbs up, waves, we're awake.
We're all good.
Okay. Everybody's so quiet. I'm kind of enjoying Lori's quilt in the background. I can see a couple people and I got Lori's quilts, making me feel happy, Lori. So the next slide we're going to talk about is the children's behavioral health governance structure. And I did a quick overview of it, but I wanted to kind of give you a little more meat on what that children's behavioral health structure looks like. In 2019, what was called the Children's Mental Health Work Group recommended replacing the Children's Behavioral Health Executive Leadership Team with a Family Youth System Partner Roundtable subgroup within their work group. And at the time, they were called the Children's Mental Health Work Group. And with integrated healthcare, we have been moving into the verbiage of behavioral health, which, if you're not aware, behavioral health encompasses both mental health and substance use, because so many times those are co-occurring. I know personally for my story with my daughter, it was her mental health issues and challenges and needs that caused her to self-medicate, which entered her into the substance use community or needs or services. And a lot of times it was like the mental health folks were like, well, we can help her. First, she needs to go through detox and she needs to deal with her SUDs. And then the SUD folks were saying, well, yes, she has SUD. However, the core is because of her mental health challenges. So let's work on those first. And it put us kind of in a hole of who can help us. And I had to really advocate for that. So I'm happy about this integrated healthcare move. It's kind of messy and slow. I think in the end, it's going to be a very good move for us. It's just important for us to represent that everywhere. So that's why they decided to change it to the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group. Because again, that word children, for a lot of people, you think children, like literally children. So the youth voice felt like they weren't being represented because they're not children. And so now it's the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group. And the FISPERT subgroup is a breakdown of that. And that subgroup will include the state representatives. It will also include community organizations, advocacy groups, tribes, providers, as well as families and youth with lived experience in the behavioral health services or other child serving systems such as foster care, JR, those sorts of services. So really that FISPERT subgroup is a combination of the system partners, the youth, and the families coming together to help make decisions. And so in between that is our state FISPERT group. So our local and regional FISPERTs have that tri-lead. Ideally, each of them have a system partner tri-lead, they have a youth tri-lead, and they have a family representative tri-lead. And those three would represent at the state table. And again, the state FISPERT is a forum, so it is open to everybody to come and participate. However, those tri-leads, when they take that position on, they're committing to be a part of doing the work at the state level. So they are more kind of required. Other FISPERT members are always welcomed and encouraged to come and share in the conversation. It's just that those tri-leads, that's their responsibility and part of the work that they're doing as a tri-lead. And then within that state FISPERT group is the selection of the subgroup. And that was given out through application processes. I know like the system partners and the state representatives, some were already pre-assigned depending on their scope of work. And then for the organizations and the advocacy groups and the tribes and the family and youth with lived experience voices, they had quite a few opening emails saying, hey, if you're interested, here's how you apply. And so that went through an application process. And then that subgroup identifies needs and barriers and gaps that haven't been answered at the other two levels below them and present it to the work group. And then the work group comes and presents it to the state legislator. So it is a really long and tedious process, and it's a very important process. The Children's and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group provides the recommendations straight to the legislature to improve behavioral health services and strategies for our children, our youth, our young adults, and families. This group includes all of these representatives that have sat at that table and worked their way up. So it's a really, really important work that the FISPERTs do. So does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to share before I move on? Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next slide, which is what does the FISPERT offer me? And I want to just ask with, oh, I can see it. I'm going to pull it up so I can see it. Just raise your hand if you've ever felt like you were somewhere and you were not heard. Just go ahead and raise your hand. Javon, can you give a quick update on how they raise their hand if they don't know? Okay, I may have lost Javon. So if you need to raise your hand, there's a little, and I'm not sure where on your screen is, but there's a little box or a little ribbon that will say participants. And then you can click that and you see the participants, and then you just click more and you tell it to raise your hand. So I see a few people have said that they've been somewhere where they felt they were not heard. And so of those, let's see, does anyone, so everybody go ahead and put your hand down. And so this next question I want to ask for those of you that raised your hand or you meant to, and I cut you off before you could, if you're willing to share a little bit about how that felt, go ahead and raise your hand again. So Mandy, you raised your hand. Are you willing to share a little bit how it felt for you to be somewhere and felt like you were not heard?
Well, okay, I grew up with a couple of disorders, cerebral palsy being one of them, and that included a learning disability. And so people would pretty much, well, in my experience growing up, especially as a youth in my teen years, was I felt dismissed, and people kind of looked down at me like, oh, you know, wouldn't understand this, so we're not going to even offer you information. Or, you know, I was put into like groups with people with other learning disabilities because there's an assumption that there was no way that I could process information. So it felt very patronizing and dismissive.
Yeah.
Which is actually what led me to be a helper, which so in a way was good because, you know, I'm in this field now, but, you know, it was hard for me.
Yeah, so you had to build that resiliency to be able to say, no, I will be heard, and I'm going to step in and be uncomfortable to make sure that others are heard, so they don't go through what I did. That's super, super awesome, Mandy. That's really, really true. Griselda, I see your hand was up. Do you want to take a moment to share?
Yeah, when I was in college, actually, it was hard for me even to go to college, to think I was smart enough to go to college. Because I was told I wasn't smart enough to go to college. And so I said, well, you know, I was going to throw a shot at it because I was a single mom with 5 children. And I said, yeah, I've got to do something, right?
Yeah.
So I went in, and even though I have test anxiety, like really super bad, and I'm always the last one out of the room, always the last one. And I start to cry. I'm just really bad, really bad. So I knew this before going into college, and I asked the teacher, I said, look, I can't take these tests. I need a room by myself. If I hear a pin drop, I totally have a panic attack. And they said, no, that I need a doctor's letter, doctor's note. So I get a doctor's note. It took me a month to get into the doctor's office. The doctor, I had to convince the doctor that I even had the problem, because it doesn't happen right off in the doctor's office, right?
Right.
So they
Because
kind
you're
of,
not taking a test in the doctor's office.
yeah. So they try to think, though, you're making an excuse so you don't have to, so it'd be easier for you. And it isn't. It's just like they're thinking, so it is hard. And then even though I gave them the letter to the teacher, they would still like make smart remarks. And then they would tell the other students, oh, well, she needs special treatment. Like, so it was hard. It was very hard.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you, because really kudos to you for stepping out, because I'm the mother of 4 children, and actually it was kind of a 2 and 2 situation, because my 2 younger are 9 and 10 years younger than my 2 older. So I really did 2, and then 10 years later, 2 more. So 5 is just kudos to you, Griselda. And yeah, it doesn't feel good to not be heard. So I have just another about 45 seconds. So I want to give a shout out to Angela if you want to shortly tell us a little bit about what you felt and your experience in not being heard.
Okay, really quickly. When I was a few years ago, I'm a pretty young mom, and I have a 15-year-old son, and he has an IEP. And I was not familiar with IEPs in the past, and I felt everything that I said, they did not take into consideration. They pretty much built his IEP without our voice in it at all. And that was very frustrating for me.
Yeah, it's hard. And then just in chat, again, this is why I do introductions and try to have an engaging conversation, because we've got Robert who's like, yeah, hey, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy as well, which is what Mandy shared. So again, it's just an opportunity. We are all in this community together. And whether we work with families, whether we work with individuals, adults, youth, it really doesn't matter because it's all one big part of the community. And the more that we can get to know each other and hear each other's stories, the better that we can improve our systems. So yeah, the other got a little bit, yeah, we're doing pretty good on time. So another thing that I wanted to share about the FISPERTS is that it is such a great place to learn. I know for me, I very regularly feel overwhelmed by the information and knowledge that those around me have. And I struggle with the fact that I am not an academic at this point. I have a high school diploma. So sometimes, and I'm a smart lady. I'm blessed to have English as my first language. I'm blessed to have been educated so that I do know how to read. And I know that there are people that don't have that blessing. Just even for my sister, she went into 5th grade and got this new teacher, and they told my mom, did you know that your daughter cannot read? And my sister was in 5th grade and she couldn't read. And just because of the childhood experience we had, that wasn't something that my mom knew. She didn't know my sister couldn't read. So my sister at whatever 11 or whatever age you are in 5th grade had to learn how to read. And she now owns her own business and is a very successful woman because she's highly resilient, and she shouldn't have had to be that resilient. Like, she shouldn't have had to. And so I get that I'm blessed and honored, yet in that I don't always understand the language. So the FISPERTS are a really great place to have a space to learn and ask. And we really work hard at not using those acronyms. So we try to say FISPERT, Family Youth System Partner Roundtable. Sometimes it becomes a little bit of a joke because there's so many acronyms, and it's like, oh, CBHMGY. That's like, wait, what is that? And so, but it's just a great place for everybody to learn. And another thing is it is a place to find common ground. I kind of wonder how many of us have felt like no one understands what we do, why we do it, and how important our work is. I know I kind of struggle with people. Oh, what do you do? Well, actually, it's hard. It's hard to explain what we do. And I think sometimes when we try to explain, people that are not a part of this community, they don't always understand. It seems like silliness to them. And they don't understand that value of that peer work, that value of those shared resources. So I just kind of wanted to have a couple people, it looks like a couple people have raised their hand. So before we move on to our next raising hand, I want to